Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Overcoming the Podcast. Today, we have joining us Darius Fennell. Darius, I'm going to turn it over to you in just a second so you can introduce yourself. I'm going to share a little bit about what I know about him. So, he is the face behind Beyond Anxiety, and he is very passionate about breaking stigmas in mental health and specifically anxiety. So I'm very interested in this because I actually have anxiety myself, officially diagnosed 2 years ago, even though I definitely struggled my entire life. So I know that there are a lot of people who are listening who struggle with managing anxiety in a more informal point of view, and maybe not diagnosed, and some who do have a diagnosis as well. So I'm really looking forward to diving deeper and hearing what you have to say. Darius, do you want to introduce yourself to everyone?
Yes. First of all, thank you for having me on. I'm just delighted to be here and just having the opportunity to talk with you and being an introvert, being able to talk with somebody else who knows what I experience on a daily basis. So I am the face beyond the face beyond anxiety. This whole thing started from just empathy and compassion, right? Looking at where I was back in the hospital, sitting down on that gurney, like what would I say to that person based on everything that I've learned up to this point?
Wow.
Right? It was 4 years ago. Excuse me. And as I mentioned before, I'm naturally introvert, so I'm usually tend to be on the private side. Like I'm not sharing my story with you, but it's like the more people I start to talk with, the more I start to learn there are other people who are struggling in silence and they don't know. They're stuck.
That's exactly how I felt with my own story. Yes.
Yeah. Like, well, if I could put together a message or just be vulnerable enough to share my own story, how many people could I help? And how can I feel like I kind of redeem my own time? Because I felt like I lost a whole year of my life basically just trying to figure out what is this?
Yeah.
Right. The first step in almost dealing with anything is having an awareness. And I didn't know what it was. Because for me, like going back to, as you mentioned earlier, I've had anxiety all my life, and I just thought that was normal. Right? It was normalized for me. Like, okay, yeah. Like, so when I got to the hospital, like, yeah, you had an anxiety attack. I'm like, no, I have anxiety all the time. Like, what are you talking about? Like, how is this different? Chronic worrier, catastrophic thoughts. One of my nicknames I had growing up was doomsayer. Because I would always think of the worst possible, situation that could happen,
Well, your brain's preparing you, right? I think of I driving through a light. I'm like, oh, a car could just run the light and hit me right now and I could spiral, or I could just not have control of my brakes and then hit this other car. Like my brain is always like that. And apparently that's not normal.
Yeah. Well, I like to think of it as it's
typical, maybe.
It's typical, but it's a misdirected sense of hope. And here's how I explain it, right? Okay. Hope, like my definition is like a confident expectation. Like you expect something to happen. There's nothing wrong with that, but when it tends to lean towards always something that's, the mushroom cloud is like, yeah, that's a problem.
Yes.
But I found out when I hit rock bottom that's like my gift. That's the core of who I am, is hope, is the expectation that things can get better and they will get better. Even though I had absolutely no evidence when everything was stripped away, all the performance, all the, stuff that we do to fill in our time, when all that was gone, like only thing that was left for me was hope. And I hitched my wagon to that and I said, okay, let's see how we can progressively walk our way out of this. So even with the name like Beyond Anxiety, it's not trying to get away from it or trying to resist or fight, because I had to learn that lesson early on as well, right? Like for me, everything was brute force. If it gets in your way, get your hammer and bang it. Okay, you may get burned out, recover and bang it again. But for anxiety, resistance is its fuel. It loves it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it is.
Okay, now I've got even stronger muscles and you can't do anything about it, right? So beyond is like, okay, after the fact, okay, you have anxiety, now what do you do next? And that's what a question that a lot of people have. What do I do now?
Yeah.
For me, because my heart was probably like the main thing that bothered me, the tachycardia and rapid heartbeat and the crazy skips that were happening. My focus was on with my cardiologist. I'm like, I'm not worried about the anxiety piece. Like, there's something wrong with my heart.
Yeah.
Why am I sitting here at rest and my heartbeat is over 140 beats per minute, which now that I know, after he sat me down and said, look, it's uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous. I didn't know that at the time because that never happened before. I'd had like short, maybe spurts of things that would come and go, but it's like, okay, yeah, this will pass eventually, right? This will go away, or the situation changes. Okay, I don't have to worry about it anymore. So there's no more anxiety for that short window of time, but this was not going away.
Absolutely.
What was the lead up to that point?
I was going to say, can you take us back to like paint the picture of where you were, what was going on, and like what kind of led you to realize the severity of your anxiety?
Yeah. So always been an overachiever, based my sense of worth off of performance, and trying to keep everybody around me happy and safe, right? Just really wanted to control that environment and make it, secure. So a previous job that I had an assignment that I had 2 weeks to do, and I did it in 3 hours.
Wow.
And then I was like, okay, cool, right? I could coast for the remainder of the time, and I'm just going to take a nap. Well, while I was taking a nap, my body said,
so that the forced rest, like your body was just like, nope, we're shutting down.
Well, it actually went in the opposite direction.
Oh, really? Okay.
So while I was asleep, the panic attack started while I was, woke me up. And I'm like, oh God, what is this? I'm looking at my wife, like, take me to the hospital. Like, I've never experienced this before. And not just the heartbeat, but like the adrenaline rush was insane.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I thought I was having a heart attack. And it's like, okay, there's no way. I used to run track and field back in high school. And my only time my heart has felt like that is after running like a relay race or something, which you expect, but not while you're asleep. And so when that woke me up, I was like, okay, again, focus it's the heart issue, something wrong with the heart. I was in the hospital for about 4 or 5 days. Wow. And they ran, oh my gosh, everything. I can't even remember all the, when your medical bills come later on and you're kind of looking at wow, you guys did all that.
And I got to pay for all that. Thanks. Like,
right.
Yeah,
right.
That adds to the anxiety too, I bet. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Oh gosh. But for the time being that I was there, I was kind of like, okay, worst case scenario, this is something I don't want to hear, but at least I can identify what it is. So now I have a course of action to take. There was no course of action because when it was all said and done, they were like, yeah, we just think you had a panic attack, just take it easy. And I'm like, been in here for 4 or 5 days and thought I was gonna die, and this is
okay. So can we talk about that? Just take it easy. It's like telling someone just calm down. Like they're frustrated. Right. It's like, oh, just calm down. When is that helpful?
Never helpful.
Like I'm curious too. So like after this, they tell you to just take it easy. Did they teach you or like give you any resources for like any relaxation techniques? Any, like, they didn't refer you to anything?
No, sign here. your bills will be in the mail. Good luck with that. Yeah.
Okay. So question for you, because this is something I've experienced a couple times. And so when I lived in Boston, I was in grad school, I was recognizing that I had some allergy stuff. Okay. And to the point where I woke up, I had a ham and pineapple pizza and a lot of bit of wine right before I went to bed. I woke up about 6 hours later with my tonsils so swollen that I was talking and choking myself in my sleep. So when I found out I was allergic to pineapple, which was a new allergy. However, it was to the point where I couldn't even swallow, and I had to I took Benadryl and I had to dissolve down my throat. It was a horrible experience. And then by the time, because I took an Uber to the hospital, which I don't recommend, but I was a college kid, and it was close. So I got there, and by the time I did that, I took 2 Benadryl and most of the swelling had gone down. And I'm telling them, and I had talked to my mom on the phone at the time, and I was literally choking myself as I was talking.
Yeah.
It was the most wild thing I've ever experienced. And so the doctors finally come in and I'm like, this is what happened. I don't know. But at the time I didn't realize like what it was. And I was like, I have to like, do you have any prior medical history? It was like, yeah, I have PTSD. I'm pretty sure I have anxiety. Wasn't diagnosed at the time. And they're like, okay. They ran tests, like, you look fine. And I was like, okay. But like, I literally just like choked. It was like, well, you said you have anxiety. It was probably an anxiety thing. And he's like, maybe it was, you were like feeling it was worse than it was. And I was like, I was literally choking while talking. And I took it, I'm like, my tonsils were huge to the point where they were almost blocking my airway. And you're trying to tell me, oh, it's just your anxiety. It's no big deal. I already took the Benadryl to get swelling down. And obviously it was an allergy. Can we figure out what this is, please? So this doesn't happen again.
Right.
And like, I had to fight for it. And I wonder for people who don't have that kind of language and don't understand and don't know how to advocate for themselves,
Right.
excuse me, what that would be like, you know, because oh, it's just anxiety. And then there was another time where I had a fish bone from, I was eating fish and chips also in Boston. Wow. And my throat was really, really hurting. Like I had this sharp pain. They didn't know what it was. They're like, we don't see anything. It's not a big deal. It was this tiny little fish bone that was poking me. And they're like, oh, it's probably your anxiety. And then later I coughed up a fish bone and I called them and I was like, no, but they wouldn't run the appropriate test because they're like, oh, just writing it off as anxiety. Yeah.
Wow. You know what? You reminded me of something. They actually were going to send me home.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Initially, when they put an IV in me at first, they gave me, I don't even remember what it was. I complained about my breathing because my chest was really tight and I had shortness of breath. That was the other part that scared me, that made me say, okay, this is probably a heart attack or something.
For sure.
They were like, oh, yeah, initial findings, we don't see anything, you're free to go. And I'm like, no, I'm not free to go. You guys need to run some additional things. So yeah, they wanted to send me home. And the only reason why I was there longer than that was because I fought.
Yeah.
Mainly out of fear, because I'm like, if this happens again, I don't, what if my wife?
Here's the thing. They'd be liable if there's active symptoms happening. They didn't run all the things and they send you home and something happened. Like they could get in trouble for that. So I'm glad you advocated for yourself. I'm glad you knew to. Another question for you about your experience in the hospital. Did you have those symptoms throughout the whole like 4 to 5 day stay? Or was it kind of like that's what brought you in there?
It happened and it got worse because my body had a reaction to because I kept complaining again about my lungs. Like I can't breathe, like I'm breathing. They were like, okay, we'll give you a steroid.
Not for anxiety.
Steroid boosted me off the planet because I didn't get any sleep. And the adrenaline blasts were just coming it's like a lion coming in a room looking like he's about to pounce on you. And you can't get out of the room except there's no real lion. But the feeling of that it was there. And I think they got to the point where they said, okay, we're going to stop giving you the steroid. And then they put a couple of IV bags, and they really ran that thing hard and tried to flush as much as, they could. And that made things a little bit better. And then I was finally discharged, but got home and these things I'm still experiencing the very thing that took me into the hospital.
Wow.
And so now I'm kind of going back and forth between my primary care and my cardiologist. So he recommended that little adhesive they stick to your chest, and it's there for 7 to 10
monitors.
Yep.
Yeah.
And can't get it wet, obviously. So you got to be careful when you're bathing and stuff. But it's really annoying because I already had the tightness, and now I have this device sitting there on my chest as well. I want to peel it off, but it's like, no, we have to get these metrics, right?
Yeah.
Mail the thing in, have my next appointment with the cardiologist, and he's like, dude, there's nothing wrong. There's no abnormalities. Your heart rate is a little elevated, but I don't see anything here I don't even know all the markers. That's not my background.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Herbs or whatever. But I mean, it was pretty thorough. And I'm like, then, okay, I guess it really is this anxiety, like on a whole nother level.
So at this point, were you already diagnosed with anxiety?
When I left the hospital and went to see my primary care, that's when I got the official generalized anxiety and panic disorder
Okay.
diagnosis, along with a bunch of other stuff too, like GERD and fibromyalgia. What was another one that was insomnia? So I had a little bit of medication for that, which, my gosh, that one, if you think you're already in a bad condition, insomnia will make you spiral even worse, because without rest, there is no healing. And I struggled for a while, and then I was on beta blockers, one of which had some type of diuretic in it that messed up my electrolytes. So, I mean,
so it was like a medical mystery and making things worse before it got better. I'm so sorry you went through that.
Yes. And again, like because I'm still focused on my heart, I'm thinking, okay, at this point, I'm trying many different things. I'd even said, okay, I'll go to therapy. But we back up a few months before that, even maybe a couple years, all the, I think what they call it, the stress points or something like that, like the death of a loved one, loss of a job, new job, moving. I was between my wife and family, we probably had like the top 5.
Wow.
And I never took the time, and my old pattern was I never really took the time to process anything.
So you just pushed it down until it came up and it was ready to explode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just ready. It did. It took me out. And that's where I learned about the whole concept around, why did that slip my mind? Nervous system dysregulation.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hard relate there. Yes.
In flight or fight. And like, okay. So the first inkling was just sleep it off, get enough rest, it'll go away. Nervous system was like, no, don't think so.
Doesn't work. It almost goes into like the opposite effect, right? It's like if you overdo anything, then it's like, oh, we're just going to make these symptoms worse when you're awake, and it's going to be a lot harder to manage, right? Yeah, been there as well.
Yeah, so not fun times. And then because I had an off-scheduled appointment with my primary care, I ended up seeing another doctor that was in the office. And she, excuse me, had introduced me to meditation.
Yeah.
And like I said, my background, coming from a Christian home, like you didn't touch anything that had any type of Eastern mysticism vibe, where it was like, hey,
your family would hate me.
hey, away from that, and not so much at home, but just the institutions I'd been exposed to. It's like, no, I mean, even medicine was like, no, you don't take medicine. What's wrong with you? But also part of my background is engineering.
Okay.
So she pointed me to a UCLA website that had all the science and numbers and research. I'm like, okay, this is my language. So I started reading, and they had several samples of, I think it was like a 1 minute, a 3 minute, a 5 minute, 10, and like 30. So person like myself who had no exposure to that before, started with the 1 minute one. And I got up to 10 and even like a half an hour. And I would say within 3 days, I was like, wow, this is starting to really like work. And all it was just body scans. Close your eyes, notice everything in the room, bring yourself to the present moment, scan from the top of your head down to your toes and back up. Just kind of, repetition of that for 5, 10, 30 minutes. And like, wow, and it started to become a habit of, when I feel kind of out of control or like the anxiety is really about to kick up, I'd return back to my breath and I start to belly breathe. I try to control situations. I'm going to fight this anxiety. It's like, nope. Okay, it's there. I see you. And now I'm going to just focus on my breath. Breathe in, breathe out, slow it down. And next thing I know, my body started to say, okay, it's using that memory and what's familiar. Okay, what happened in the past when these sensations happen? Oh, he belly breathes, he relaxed. There's no danger. Okay, you slowly start to pull yourself. Now, again, this was not overnight.
Oh, no, yeah, it takes time. It does. You're changing like a computer system program.
Right.
That's, like you're finding the glitches and you're like, oh, got to do it again. Got to fix it again. Got to, over and over and over. That's what it is.
Yeah. So that was, gosh, I went to the hospital, that is, right before my 40th birthday in 2018. And that whole year, I honestly felt like I was just robbed of being able to do anything.
Yeah.
Like, how bad did it get? Like, when I first got home, I couldn't even look at my phone. I couldn't watch TV. Being
Mhm.
around people or coming downstairs to eat dinner, it was just too much. It was overwhelming.
Yeah.
So for the most part, I spent a lot of time in my bed. I'd go use the bathroom and bathe, but even that, like, for whatever reason, something about the shower would make my heart rate kick up,
Mhm.
you know? And here was the other strange piece that really bothered me. There weren't any thoughts that were connected to the
Exactly
anxiety.
what I was going to ask is like, did you ever identify any like thought spirals or anything that made it worse?
So it was actually the opposite, where I was trying to identify something. Okay, maybe if I fix this, maybe
Uh,
this is why it's happening. Or if okay, remember that thing years, okay, let's try to, descramble that and fix that thought or whatever. But it wasn't that. It went back to the whole, nervous system dysregulation thing, which I did not learn about till years later. So
Hey, honestly, they don't teach that in school. They don't, I mean, they're starting to a little bit now, but like these important, like social, emotional, understanding how your nervous system works, they don't teach that stuff. Like, that's literally why I made a course about all this stuff. Cause I'm like, I know this and this has helped me so much in my healing, but people who don't know this, it's really hard to problem solve yourself, you
right.
know?
I mean, in the period of time, I had to like struggle because I didn't know. And then I think I came across, I think it was on Instagram, Jessica McGuire. She's out of Australia. She has a
Mm-hmm.
course, and I watched first started with some of her YouTube videos. Um, but that led me down the road of just reading about everything dealing with polyvagal theory and the nervous system and the autonomic, parasympathetic,
Yep.
sympathetic,
Yep.
and how you stimulate. Why does one overtake the other? And then just more recently, understanding like the gut and how that is a brain in and of itself. And I'm like,
Yes.
hey, from a pure science standpoint, like this is fascinating, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But also, it's like, okay, how can I apply this, and how can I make this work for myself? And
Yeah.
not every single tool works for everybody. Like I've heard a lot of people kind of what I feel like is being a little more overly critical towards talk therapy, because for me, that was my gateway. There were
Yeah.
certain things I hadn't talked about for years, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so let me see. So again, backing up to coming home from the hospital, dealing with the primary care, and talking with my cardiologist, I also started going to therapy.
Fantastic.
And so some very quick lessons I had to learn about myself. I
Mm-hmm.
think we had talked about this earlier, was how I regarded myself. And I had regarded myself as a machine.
Mm-hmm.
You don't think of like, you think about your washing machine, like you don't think about how the washing machine is feeling.
Yeah.
Have one objective, and that's to use it,
Yeah.
right? Put your clothes in, and the only time you really give it attention is if it's doing what it's designed to do, or
Yeah.
not working properly, and then you do whatever maintenance, and then you don't really pay attention to it anymore. And that's how I had regarded, the deep-rooted emotions and feelings and the
Mm-hmm.
losses and things that it's like, no, take it up another gear. And the dangerous thing is when you're younger, you think you're invincible,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't think you will ever break.
Yeah.
And that was my thing. I was like, well, I'll just take it up another notch. Like, I live for this moment of the
Mm.
opposition and resistance. And if it gets tough, I'll be tougher. But everybody has that, that edge where it's no longer true, or just age. When I
Yeah.
hit 40, I was like, ooh.
I gotta slow down. It makes me think of like the football star who thinks they can do the same thing when they're like older. And they're like, why is my body not working the same way? It's like, I feel like our nervous system does that same thing, right? Like if we're not paying attention, if we're not like, if someone's conditioning their body all the time and they were this, high school football star, great. Then maybe when they're 40 and they've still been doing that same kind of work, their body's conditioned and they're good. But if you're not in the same place, that's not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And so I kind of think of that with
The
mental health as
mind,
well. Mm-hmm.
yeah, the mind, when you're convinced of something that's not like true. And here's the other piece. There were many people who did not know each other, independently came to me, who knew me well enough to say, you need to slow down, man.
Mm,
You know me? There's no such thing as slowing down. Matter of fact, just because you said that, I'm going to push the clutch in and I'm going to watch this.
No. Okay, so question about this then. So belief wise, let's look back. When you're reflecting now, do you think any of that belief comes from being a man in society or family culture, or you know what I mean, like anything? Because I feel when you talk to men, like they don't, like, we don't have feelings, we don't process feelings, we just power through.
Exactly. And that's one of the other motivating reasons for me to, come out in public and share my story, is I want somebody to identify and say, oh, there's a man that actually, has processed his feelings and does go to therapy. And it doesn't mean that you're weak. Matter of fact, it takes courage,
Yes.
And here's the other piece. I don't have a lot of regrets in life, maybe two, but the main one I'm going to tell you about is, so 2017, a lot of crazy stuff had happened. My wife and I, one of the major things was we lost a baby.
Sorry to hear that.
At stillbirth. And so I had an opportunity to go to therapy then, like through insurance and whatever, I think employee assistance programs that they have. It's almost like a Google, you type in kind of the things that you want to be seen for and talk about. And here comes a list of people who have specialties and tools to help you get through, your stuff. I had the name, I had the number. All I had to do was call and make it the appointment. And I was like, push the clutch in, another gear, man. We're gone,
What do you think stopped you?
The stigmas, right? Like in my head, before I'd come into all this stuff, like, you went to therapy if there was something really, really wrong, which for me, it was, but I didn't associate myself with that, and as a man, like, you don't want to feel inadequate or weak, or what will other people think if they know that, I've gone here. They also think that I'm crazy or that I have some other crazy things going on. The truth is, we all do.
Yeah.
I'm
a huge proponent of therapy.
If shown in a movie theater, it's like we're not that much different from each other, But we tend to hide it a little better. And that was my way of hiding, was through performance. How much can I produce? How much can I keep the people around me happy? How much can I learn how to say all the right things and look the right way, until your inside is just like, hey man, can we talk? And it's like, no, I'm not talking to you. Get back in there. Get back in the closet. We're not going to deal with that right now. In fact, if I just keep myself busy enough, you'll kind of go away. It's not true.
Interesting.
Not true. Yeah. And so I brought up, and it culminated not just from, us losing the, baby, but we moved a couple times in the last so many years before that. And it's difficult, when you have kids and you have to figure out schools and doctors and just stuff you got to throw away. Like, it's hard. And matter of fact, when we moved to where we are now, my wife was pregnant. So, added thing of just, again, culminating factors that were never processed.
It kind of seems like the trauma of that exacerbated things, and then it was like this slow build until it was this point of like, hey, we can't handle this anymore. And I think that's very common for a lot of people, that sometimes like one thing sets off this whole other slew of issues that they didn't realize were there, right? And then all of a sudden they're like, life as I know it is completely different. Like sometimes one event can unveil so much about us and just dismantle the system to bring all these things up, right? It's like that nervous system regulation, like your cup gets so full and then one big thing happens and all of a sudden you're just constantly overflowing in this complete overload, complete dysregulation. And you're like, if you have no experience with that, especially like tuning in, it's scary. And I relate too with, I was always taught that therapy means that you're crazy. And it was used, an inpatient mental institution was used for me as a potential punishment. I'm going to throw you in there because you're like gaslighting and, abuse there. But for me, like, it took a while to break that stigma in myself. And like, I broke down and I was like, I need to get tested and know that I am not crazy. And, I don't like using that language now, but like, that's what it was. Right. And so I understand with that stigma because, I love that we have that shared vision of just showing up, just sharing it real. And even though we have different lenses, sometimes it's really to change the stigma on mental health and getting help. So, moving into more of what you do on your platform. So first of all, I love your videos. I'm always so entertained. It just makes me happy. When you are, so like, let's think about if someone comes to you and they're maybe realizing they have anxiety, what's some advice that you would give them?
Yeah, I think the first thing, going back to my own self, first I would say I'm not a licensed professional. I always have to start with that because I've had a few people come to my DMs and I start with that. Like, listen, what I share with you is my personal experience of what helped me. And, I highly recommend you see a licensed professional, whether it's a therapist or your primary care physician, right? Like, I believe it also an integrative approach because one of the things that I was able to rule out through blood tests and a bunch of other stuff was, hey, there's nothing wrong with my thyroid or any other, gland or hormone, nothing's out of balance. So we can rule all that out. And I've met other people where, they did have a thyroid problem and that was contributing to their anxiety and they had to take action for it. So like my path may not be your path, but I would say the first thing, and this is one of the first things that I was told, aside from having an awareness, is self-compassion, right?
I love that.
We're not worth any less because you're in a crisis state or in a situation where you don't know what's going on and you can't fix it. Secondly, be patient with yourself in the process, because as we've heard before, and I've even said it myself, healing is in recovery is not linear. So a setback doesn't mean, you got to go, back to, what is the Monopoly saying? Don't pass go, don't collect $200 in the jail. Now you got to start. That's not necessarily true, but I had to learn some of those hard lessons. Thirdly, I would say give yourself grace. Give yourself grace to make mistakes on the days that you can't show up. And there's going to be a lot of those where, like, some of my biggest wins was getting up and brushing my teeth because I didn't feel like doing that. And the biggest thing is just know that things will, again, going back to like the phrase I use for myself, being a champion of hope, it's going to get better. You're going to come out of this. I'm not saying how or what the best method's going to be or try to prescribe anything, but you're going to figure it out as long as you're willing to get the help and be vulnerable enough to deal with whatever the root causes are. And that, I just want to expound on the word vulnerable, right? Like, a lot of people think, it just means you're weak. And I was leading a men's group one time, and I explained to them that being vulnerable is being open in trusted environments. And that's the difference. Like, therapy for me was an open, safe environment where I could say, okay, let me pull the mask off and show you who I really am and not worried about being judged. And now you can speak into my situation and give me a different perspective about how I've been viewing things and maybe some potential ways I could think differently and reframe.
I agree. And I think people confuse vulnerability with this just like chronic oversharing, or someone who's just like seeking attention, or, that they can't manage anything themselves. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because that's actually one of the 3 steps that I believe is important in any kind of healing, is the self-awareness of what's happening in the science or whatever, management, self-management of your life and getting everything together, whether it's the doctor, whether it's the therapy, whether it's your daily life stuff, right? And then vulnerability, and not vulnerability as in I'm going to share my story with everyone like you're doing right now, but more like being able to be honest and open to receiving support, but also honest and being able to give feedback to yourself. Because that's where that self-monitoring piece comes in, right?
embrace those parts of you that are quote unquote ugly.
Yeah.
That's what we learn from. At least that's what I ran from.
Yeah.
Like, let me go and create something wonderful so everybody can tell me how great I am versus, yeah, maybe I am great, but that doesn't, dismiss you from being able to deal with that thing over there that's been trying to get your attention for years.
Yeah.
For years.
Oh, I'm sure.
So
I know you said like you, looking back, you've kind of always been this way, right? Like it's kind of been a thing. When you look back to your childhood, were there any markers where you felt like somehow I had to earn love or affection? I'm thinking like inner child stuff. Like, have you ever done any inner child healing or done any reflection of that? And like, what was your experience with that? Because I think a lot of people relate to that who have anxiety.
Oh yeah. So I'm the youngest of 3 boys. And so you're always kind of the last of the Mohicans, right? Like you're the last person to but everybody kind of left some type of standard before you. And I always wanted to meet or exceed that standard. Both my parents taught in the school system, so there wasn't a lot I could get away with. Even my godmother taught. And so every school I went to, like somebody I was close to was there. So there wasn't a lot of room for foolishness,
Yep.
which served the purpose and allowed me to, accomplish a lot of things and stay out of a lot of trouble. Like my brothers weren't into we were all scholar athletes and nobody was into drugs or, wild partying activity and things that would be considered dangerous. And so I did everything or try to do everything that they did. But there were times where, because I was the youngest, when something's already occurred, like if you've seen a movie already, like that suspense or that thrill moment, it's not the same.
Yeah.
Because your brother already graduated. So yeah, we'll still have a party, but you can kind of feel where it's like.
So you're like proving yourself. You're like trying to like get that. Ooh. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
For the most part, like, and this is where the word evolution comes, right? Because there's still that temptation to want to try to prove stuff even now. But now I have an awareness to say, where that road leads. You know exactly where that road leads. Even if it doesn't happen right away, that road. Don't go on. Now's the time to really embrace who you are and understand your own identity, the good, the bad, the ugly, and cultivate that versus, there's nothing wrong with healthy competition. Like I love to compete, but now it's no longer I have to do this so I can feel acceptable. That's the difference, or I have to reach this certain place within employment or a certain status, or I won't feel acceptable or love or like I'm good enough. Right? And that's taken like so long first of all to identify like what's actually fueling you, having to sit still for an extended period of time, and now I can't use my fillers. I can't use things that would cover up or numb the feelings of inadequacy, and I have to kind of sit here because I can't do anything else. Well, now you have to deal with it. Now you're in this crock pot of life and there is no microwave quick fixes. You have to walk the path and walk the journey. And this is why I advocate so, strongly for therapy, because I don't know of anybody who could do that themselves. Right?
No.
There's parts of you that has to do the work, but you need professional guidance.
Yeah.
Else you would have never gotten to the situation in the first place. And that's the other thing, like you have to accept, where for me, my answer for everything was just brute force. Time and energy into it, and you can accomplish and beat or fix or prove anything.
Yep.
But when you don't have rest included in that, you don't take time to self-care, you're not eating correctly. That's another huge piece.
Yeah, because when you're overwhelmed, you stop eating correctly, and then that throws off your whole system. Oh my gosh, I just made a reel on that. Yeah, like that's one of the first things to go for me. Is it feels overwhelming to make a meal, and so then I'm just eating like Taco Bell burritos, which makes me feel like crap physically. It's not giving me the nutrients I need, and then it's just this spiral of your physical health and your mental health, and then you're just like, oh my goodness. And then there's that shame that comes along with it.
Oh my gosh, that was the other kind of social aspect, right? My wife's an extrovert, so hey, we're gonna get together with some. Like, I have to leave the house. I don't want to leave,
Yeah.
and then people start to notice, it's like, wow, he's a little off, they may not say what the word, but you can tell, like, and then, I mean, I already have like a low social, battery anyway, but back then, a few years ago, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'd have to, there were moments I'd have to kind of leave a room or just kind of go for a walk and get away from all the stimulus, because again, I was such at a heightened state of this. And the other thing is I'm an empath, so I'm naturally sensitive and feel things and people and situations, all the feels anyway. So you add this on top of that, and it's like,
I saw something as a theory, because I'm also empathic, and it, especially in my younger teen years, especially when you're already dealing with the internal shifts in your body and your hormones, and you're picking up on everyone's stuff, and you don't understand boundaries, and it's just like whole mess of issues. What I found was that someone recently, and I wish I knew who it was, is saying there's like this theory that empaths is maybe not necessarily like this gift or this type of connection, that maybe it's stems from hypervigilance in early life. That's like an adaptation that we now have to predict potential challenges. And I'm like, ooh, and that would make sense why many trauma survivors identify as empaths. Right. And I was like, just a little thing that I found interesting.
Oh yeah, but it allows you to dig deeper too into your own story and say, okay, well, if that's true, like how does that apply to myself, and what process can I go through to kind of make that better? So it stings at first, because like, wait a minute, I thought I was special, right?
I know. I was like, ooh, I am gifted. Look at this. Like, I remember I took the MBTI personality test, and it said I was the most rare the first time I took it. And I was like, I'm special. I'm special.
Right.
It was like INFJ at first, which isn't true anymore. But yeah, it's pretty funny.
You shifted away from INFJ, because that's what I am too.
I'm INFP more now. I'm like on the border of P and J. But what's interesting, so you're talking about you just push through. So like I've kind of been in this like high anxiety. So like mine, I was the oldest, and it was 3.5 years that I was the princess, and I was the first girl in the family for a long time. Okay. So like I was adored, but I also was the show pony.
Okay.
And like I said before, my parents were narcissistic. And so it's, what can you do for me? Right. And so I was labeled as the smart one early on, and rehearse, flashcards, things like that. And I just got really good at proving myself, learning how to get praise, learning how to get attention. By the time I was 2, I knew all of the states and capitals. And I think it was like the countries. By the time I was 3, I had to have like the times tables. Like I had to learn something before I got up from the dinner table, like things like that, which like it was helpful a little bit, but I recognized that like I was the high achiever. I was the smart one. And that's how I got attention. Right. And then my little brother, so I was 3.5 when he was born, and it went from all the attention on me all the time to now there's this baby, to the point where I wasn't getting the attention that I wanted anymore. And he started walking, and I pushed him down on his first steps because he was getting so much attention. Like that's where they still blame me for that. And I'm like, that's how you raised me, to seek every ounce of attention. And so in my early life, and so I was wired to be this perfectionist, and like, especially like, it was like the good grades. I heavy sobbed when I came home in junior high from orchestra and had a B. Like panic attack sobbed. And my parents are like, what's wrong with you? Not realizing they created this, right? And so I think that, I've always had anxiety, definitely. And I was also in a family where we don't talk about mental health. We definitely don't talk about trauma or anyone could be doing something possibly wrong. We're all perfect here. Or my parents, I'm perfect. You are a reflection of me. Therefore you must be perfect. And I just find it really interesting how that has shifted things
Yeah.
in my own life. And, I wouldn't say that I got a doctorate because of that, because I definitely like stepped out of that kind of achieving part. But the perfectionist in me, I have like stopped myself from moving forward in my business because it's like, what are they going to think? I
Yep.
can't be perfect here.
Yep.
I was terrified to share my story because what if someone thinks of me differently as a professional because of that? And my reputation is so important and I need to be seen as this like golden star, right? And what if I show up as damaged, or what if there's anything that people don't relate to? I morphed myself into a chameleon to be whatever I needed to be liked by people. Like, and that's just anxiety from early childhood and how to be accepted, right?
Yeah.
And so I look at it now and I'm like, they just they look at me and they don't understand my anxiety. And then later when we're talking about PTSD and complex trauma, it's just never been something that's been understood. So now here I am speaking up, and survivors overcome in silence have a whole freaking platform talking about it, and they're not happy about it. I will say that. It's not for them. It's for everyone else who needs the support. But I think that, in ways that, whether I think yours, and correct me if I'm wrong, it kind of seems like yours was more an internalized pressure, and mine was a combination, right? That even so, that pressure is still there. And I think that, I was reading something a while ago too, that for kids these days that are growing up in the school system that is so focused on numbers and achievement, to the point where they put scores of other kids' benchmarks every quarter so you can see who's doing well and how much they progressed, like in these little charts in front of all the kids. And I'm like, that's traumatizing. But it just breeds this mental health crisis for these kids.
Yep. Because when you mentioned like experiencing these things at an early age, you create a pattern.
Yeah.
And it's terribly difficult to undo that pattern, right? It's like if I told you one day, when you go drive, red means go, green means stop. Do you know how difficult that would be? How many lights you would run?
Oh, yeah.
Stay stuck when you're supposed to be moving.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes ingrained so early, and becomes like that drive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I use it as such. It was like, okay, I can't control this thing. I'll just do what I've always done and turn it into fuel.
Yeah.
Oh, please tell me I can't do something. Please tell me I'm not good enough. I need you to. I need you to. Because now I feel like I'm right back at home in the comfortable, familiar place. And this is where we show you the magic till the magic runs out.
Yeah.
You're in the hospital with all these IVs coming out. Well, it's not funny, but I was like so dehydrated. They stuck my arm like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
And so the doctor came in. She's like, yeah, you're not going to like this, but that little jugular, she's like, she literally said it's so juicy. It's the only place that we feel like we can, that thing burned.
I'm sure.
That night, some nurse came in. I said, listen, you got to get this thing out of my neck.
Yeah. Think of how sensitive the neck is, like sensation wise. Oh,
every time they put a medicine in, there's a one port that has the IV drip going, and there's another port where they can just apply medicine, right?
Yep.
Every time, and they were doing it gently, but it burns. I mean, from all the way down. Oh, it was bad. And then, like I said, I still there. I didn't even sleep. But yeah. Oh gosh, just thinking back now, I get teary-eyed because I remember thinking, I'm never coming out of this.
Yeah.
Where I'm gonna be, I was sharing on another podcast. You remember the movie Ghost with Patrick Swayze?
Mm-hmm.
Remember after he was murdered in the movie, like as days went on, he had on the same outfit.
Yeah.
So because I was in such a dark place, when I would get dressed for the day, and my mindset of thinking that this is probably it, I would be very mindful about which outfit I would pick, because like I don't want to have to wear that for eternity, right? Like that's where my head was.
Oh, that's such a hard place to be in. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry.
Yep. I'd be staring at like, okay, I'm gonna wear yellow for for
Wow.
eternity.
And that adds to the anxiety too. Like,
Right.
how am I going to be judged forever if this is the last time? Oh my goodness.
Yeah. But that's where I can laugh now, but back
Yeah.
then, like, because I felt such in a really, it feels like a tight bubble
Hmm.
that I had to slowly start to expand back out.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I had to accept was learning to sit with things.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
My mindset was, if I don't like this, I'm either going to destroy it or I'm going to get away from it, far away from it.
Hmm.
So you are telling me something that feels counterintuitive. I don't want to feel. The whole point is to get rid of. That was the
Yeah.
mindset back then, just starting off with therapy. But
Hmm.
um, your feelings and emotions, they're not the whole truth, but they are an indicator. They're not motivators, but they are indicators.
Yeah. They're clues. I always say, like, emotions are clues to what is happening. Your body is expressing a need, and it's a clue to telling you what it needs. The more you ignore it, the louder it will eventually get until you learn how to meet the need, or it will force you and dismantle you until
Right.
you're forced to take care of it. Been there. Yes. And unfortunately, most of us have to learn that lesson the hard way.
And that was me, and
Yeah.
that's one of my other messages is you do not have to wait for a crisis. Just
No.
like get the tools now. If I had all the tools now back in 2018, oh my goodness, what?
Yeah.
But then I wouldn't have all the other
Hmm.
messages and being able to relate and have empathy for people who are stuck and don't know what to do and feel hopeless. Because I
Yeah.
know what that like, and not just any other condition I've ever had before, injury or sickness, whether it be flu or something like that. Like maybe the max of like just feeling debilitated was maybe 10 days,
Yeah.
right? Well, the mindset is okay. Doc gives you some pills, you take them,
Hmm.
and eventually your body's going to heal itself and you're going to come out and go back to life as normal.
Absolutely.
Thought that was going to happen 4 years ago. And that was the scary part where it's like, okay, my willpower is not going to work anymore.
Hmm.
I'm not invincible, you know? And now, like what I thought was going to be a short duration thing seems
Hmm.
like it's endless.
Yeah.
What the heck am I supposed to do with all this? And by the way, still full-time employee, still a full-time husband, still a full-time father. None of those things, bills, nothing. Nobody's gonna say, "Oh man, we're sorry you're going through this. Well, hey, take a few months off."
Life
No,
doesn't stop just because you need to. Yeah.
no, not no. And so that was the other thing was it changes the whole dynamics of your whole house because your kids are like, "Wait, what's wrong with daddy? How come when we go
Hmm.
places he doesn't come?"
Yeah.
I explained to them, I was like, "I love you guys, but I'm in a place right now where I need a little time to just get myself together,
Hmm.
and it's not that I don't want to spend time with you. It's not that I don't love you. Um, the daddy's not well right now, because you can kind of see, like, I heard one of them say one time, daddy doesn't spend any time with us. I'm like,
Oh.
this is the worst thing I ever want to hear, but like, okay, let me sit them down and explain, like, in where they can,
Yeah.
and because you don't want to put all that stuff on them
Yeah.
because then the couple of
Fair.
my kids are empaths. You don't want them to feel like they need to fix you.
Hmm.
So my daughter
Hmm.
the other day, I was like, my emotions are not your responsibility.
I'm
You
glad
know,
you said that because I would imagine that they might internalize that, oh, it must be something I'm doing.
yeah,
You know what I
nope,
mean? Yeah.
yeah, nope. Sat them down and said, nope. Here's what's going on. And then a couple years later, I was featured in Helpful Living magazine, and so I let them kind of see and read, and a little bit more understanding. They were a little older, so they
Yeah.
could take in a little more. I let them read, but they were able to see kind of firsthand where I was and where I am now. And so,
Yeah.
here's a living example of how you can go through something difficult, be vulnerable enough to get the help that you need, and come
Hmm.
out better on the other side.
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing, like, it's not a checkbox. It's not a destination. It's not like, okay, because
Mm-mm.
that was coming in, that was my mindset, right? And I, to be honest now,
Fix it. Like,
I
yes.
come into therapy with an agenda,
Yeah.
right? Like you're gonna, using the car analogy, you're gonna change this oil, put these new tires on, and put me back in the race.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm going to press you
Mm-hmm.
for all the things I need to do to get myself back. And then
Little did you know that's an anxiety response too. Fix it,
well,
resolve it. Mm-hmm. Control.
Right.
Yeah.
But the even deeper reality of understanding I have to let go of that old identity. That
Oh, yes.
mind shift, because now I have to grieve this old person,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's parts of me that's envying this old person that felt like he could do whatever he wanted to do whenever he wanted to do it.
Yep.
It could do it at a fast rate. And then my therapist asked me, she said, if you really could, would you really go back to that? And my reaction was like, heck yeah, I'd go back to, but then I was like,
I don't know.
Look where that road took me. Like, maybe I'm more afraid of embracing this new era more so than the aspect of not wanting to let go, because now this is uncharted territory.
Yeah.
Again, the whole reason for advocating for therapy is for somebody to help you walk through this new era of your life.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
you can't do it on your own. And that was took a while to accept that. But I remember she knew what I was doing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sure. She's just sitting there like, yeah, keep going. I'm just writing down.
She look at me, she just like, she'd say, Darius. She said, we're gonna take our time. I'm inside, I'm like, no.
You're like, I wanna.
Yes, you know.
I think that is so common, and I'm really glad you brought that up, is that anyone who has struggled with seeking control, anxiety, anything like that as a response, you try to seek control of your recovery.
Yes.
And it doesn't work that way. Your body and your brain lead, and you have to follow. And it's very hard. You really have to surrender to the process. And like you said, it's like, it's a whole new identity.
The P word. I used to hate, like, don't tell me. For me, again, go back to engineering. If I have the equation, if I put the input in, here's what comes out the other side, and we're done. Boom.
Yep.
Mission accomplished. No, it doesn't work that way.
It does not.
I came to my therapist, I was like, give me books, I need articles, I need tools. I'm gonna go home and work these things. And she's like, no. We can do tools, but he's like,
but it's still achievement oriented to get to an end point in your mind, right? And I think I relate to that too, because I didn't even realize I was doing it. I was first diagnosed with acute stress disorder long before anxiety after a big event. And I went in there and I was like unable to function. I had a hard time eating, sleeping, definitely insomnia. I was like you, I couldn't socialize. I couldn't trust my own body. On top of that, I had trauma stuff where I was like visually hallucinating with like trauma that had happened. And I was just like, my identity has always been the smart one. I'm the smart one. I am the one who's supposed to know what's happening here and have everything together. Yep. This makes me feel like I am not smart. I am not in control. And it was this huge identity shift. And I was just like, I don't believe, like, I literally looked at them after like, it was like a month of therapy. And I was like, okay, what exactly do I need to do to get back to my old self again? And she looked at me, and to this day, her look on her face is just deeply ingrained. It was like, it was compassion and also like, I'm going to shake this girl's world. And she was like, you are never going to be that version again.
She said that to you?
She did. And she said, however,
okay.
I know. Oh no, she did. She's like, you're not going to, she's like, you're not going to be, she's like, you are forever changed. She's like, you are not that person. You cannot go back to who you were. Okay. However, you will learn to integrate these things about you and move forward and be a new version of yourself and be able to find happiness and peace again. But it's always going to be with you in a different way.
Yeah.
I was just like, what? Like, no. And I was resistant to that at first, but now I look back and I'm like, that was I think that is possibly the most powerful piece of advice a therapist has ever shared with me.
That's a red pill moment.
Yeah. I was like, oh,
definitely.
And it shook me out of this. And then we had this conversation of, why do you think you need to do this?
Yeah.
Like, why does it need to be the certain steps? And then I realized, I was like, oh my gosh, I've been a control freak my entire life. And then immediately started judging myself when I realized I wasn't perfect and something was wrong with me. She's like, okay, let's look at ourselves with some compassion here. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm horrible. And she's like, we're still acting out of that control. All right. Like, it's not about, it's like, you're allowed to be who you are in the moment.
Right.
And it was really, for me, being okay having all of this shadow stuff come up and integrating that and not hating myself when I saw these things I didn't like.
Right.
That's what it came down to. And once I started finding more comfort in, I still had moments of dysregulation. I still, to this day, I still do. And
I had some earlier this week.
I know. I'm like, I still scream to the universe sometimes, like, when are you gonna fix this? I thought this was done. Like, and I teach people, you know what I mean? But it's just part of the process, and it's part of the journey. And like you said before, a setback doesn't mean that it's over. Doesn't mean you have to go back to square one. Like, it's part of it. And I think once you stop fighting that's when you can start doing the work.
Yeah, I was just about to say it's about the embrace. There was two things. Like, I don't know if you know who Ronda Rousey is. She used to fight in the mixed martial arts. So she had like her first defeat, and she went through like a really dark period. And one of the things that she said, she went on the Ellen DeGeneres show, and one of the things that she said after losing was, she was like, if I'm not this, then what am I? And that hit so deeply. If I'm not the perfectionist or the person who can accomplish things or the person who can do a lot of high output and achieve stuff, like, who am I? And after and she had a devastating loss. Like, this woman was going through and just dusting people off. And then, somebody came that, she met her match and, got obliterated. And everybody was like shocked. We were like, this wasn't supposed to happen. Wow. She disappeared for a little while.
I bet.
But yeah, that was one of the main things that she had said to Ellen. The other thing has slipped my mind, but the embracing part, and taking in the good, the bad, and the ugly. Again, a therapist was the person to help me to do that. Oh, here was the other thing. So there was one training module I went through. I can't remember the person's name, but they said to create a character for your anxiety.
Yeah, I do that actually. Yeah.
But I had to stop doing that. And here's why. It goes back to the whole resistance thing.
Interesting.
Right? I don't know if you were into the Marvel movies, but there's a character named Thanos. And that was my anxiety character. But to this day, I know he's fictional, but because of the relationship and what he represents to me, I used to hate him. But again, that whole kind of wanting to, like, even when I saw Endgame, my heart was pumping so hard. I'm like, get him, because of what
you made that strong association in your brain. Wow.
Oh my gosh. Like, at the end of the Infinity War, when he did the snap, and spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen it, but you should have seen it by now.
I was going to say, it's been years. They should be fine. Right. Yes.
And he sits down and he makes that smirk. Like, it infuriated me, because it's like, in most movies, like, the good guys win, right? No, they got dusted, literally.
Yeah.
And he had this look on his face. He sat down and he was just like, I got him. And that's how I felt anxiety had done to me. Like, yeah, I got you. But I had to kind of put that aside to say, you're not my enemy that I have to get up and try to fight every day.
Yeah.
You're actually a part of me that's kind of oversensitized and that's trying to protect me. So how can I communicate and actually connect with you?
Yes.
And reprogram, how you operate. One day, so here was another anxiety symptom, was agoraphobia. And it wasn't so much that I was afraid of anything outside. It was, what if I get somewhere and I go into a full-blown panic attack? Like, that was one of my greatest fears. So any thought of having to go to a doctor's appointment or go to a friend's house or even go out and get something to eat, like, I come up with an excuse because I don't want to, go through this. But, eventually I had to start doing very progressive things to literally expose myself to the very thing I was afraid of, to the point where I remember one day, I've seen other people talk about that one breakthrough day where they kind of busted through. And for me, I remember it started with just going to the doorknob
Hmm.
and then going back to my bedroom. The next day, open the door. The next day after that, go walk to your car.
You're
Okay, the next day,
scaffolding yourself. I like it.
yep, and little by little, expanding that bubble back out
Mhm.
in such a way that has compassion. I'm not fighting where I got to prove that I'm better than anxiety and I can beat it. It's like, nope,
Yeah.
I'm letting my subconscious mind know it's uncomfortable, it's not dangerous.
Mhm.
Had all the tests to rule out any physical issue or anything from physiology or something's not functioning properly. All those
Mhm.
things have been ruled out. You've done
Yep.
more than enough tests.
Yep.
This is the mind-body connection, and you have to walk the process. I
Yeah.
remember the one day when my mind started to like say all these I don't want to call them threats, but just like what ifs. And I just started
Yeah.
talking back. I was like, okay, do it. Okay, what if it does happen?
I love
Okay.
that.
Yeah. Like, so what? So what? Maybe. All right. Okay, do
I
it.
love that as a coping mechanism. Have you seen the show This Is Us?
I have not seen that show.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, so there's a character, name is Randall. Basically, he was the one who's adopted into the family, and he's like this perfectionist,
Yeah.
and he it shows him from an early age dealing with anxiety, and I liked him the most the entire time because the way the show like gets into characters, it really helps you connect to like struggles and breaks so many stigmas, and I love it. But one of the things that he and his wife do when his anxiety pops up is they play a game called Worst Case Scenario,
Mm.
where they literally just start naming off what is the worst thing that could happen in this scenario. And by the end, they're laughing about it, whatever, but it's how he gets control over his anxiety.
Yeah.
And I find it to be really helpful because it's like he's taking the power back from those catastrophic thoughts.
Yep.
Right. And I've actually done that before. I'm like, okay, worst case scenario, what happens here? Worst case scenario, what happens here? Right. And you just list all these things and you're just like, whoo, and you're kind of like panicking, thinking about it. But then what I've started doing is, okay, what's the best case scenario from this?
Right.
What, like changing the pattern. Like, yeah, if I quit my job and go all in on my business, I could be homeless on the streets. I could have a horrible reputation. People could hate me, whatever. What's the best case scenario? I'm helping a lot of people. I am doing something that I love every single day. I am financially free, whatever it may be. Right. And so then shifting that mindset from whenever that worst case scenario pops up, okay, what's something that on the whole opposite end of the spectrum that could happen? And usually what happens is somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah.
But just being able to kind of look at that and the duality on each end of the spectrum, I think has been so helpful in managing my anxiety. And I literally was just like, I just thought of this because I watched This Is Us. I'm going to make it into my thing. And, and also like, that show, if you ever look into any clips or anything, it's a really, really powerful way of explaining anxiety to anyone who's listening. It's just very powerful. And he is this high achieving, well-regarded person, always trying to prove himself. But then you see these internal things that he deals with behind closed doors, and it's amazing. And honestly, I think it's done very realistically and with compassion. I love it. But anyways, that was just a tangent there. But let me just say, Darius, I have loved this conversation. I feel like we could keep talking for like absolutely ever.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to have you come on for a follow-up. But I want, for time's sake, I want to wrap us up. And before we go, is there any last words that you would share to anyone listening? Any advice, anything like that?
Yes. I would say just look right into the camera and say, for the folks that that you are struggling and going through things, and that you cannot do it on your own, right? I can't say it enough. There's nothing wrong with seeking help. And you're not lazy, you're not crazy, you're not weak for wanting to seek that. Matter of fact, you're courageous to do so. And your life will be so much better because you are doing the work. You're getting to know yourself better. You're conquering the things that you used to run from. And you're learning to sit with the things that you can't control and still have a sense of peace and joy and love.
Yeah.
So, it's totally worth it. And you don't have to wait until a crisis for it to happen. So there's other things like local support groups, online support groups, that will supplement, things that will help you. Like I went to see a dietitian. I also went to physical therapy because I was having so many other symptoms that we didn't even get to talk about today. But there were so many things
Occupational
that were,
therapy.
yeah, there were so
Yeah.
many things that, um, that were not just therapy based, but I had to seek help for to look at everything from an integrated, like a full scope of not just how my thoughts were operating, but you know, uh, I want to be careful about saying trying to get to the best version of myself, but at the same time embracing where you are, but also identifying those things that are creating limited beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
and it does take professional help for it. So
Yeah.
that's my message to, it does get better, it will get better, and to just take it one day at a time, and know that your worth is intrinsic and you are loved regardless of
Mm-hmm.
how you're feeling or what you're going through. So
Beautiful, powerful. I love that. Like I needed to hear that.
yeah.
Like that just warmed my heart there. Oh my goodness. And I think too what you were saying about like the best version of yourself. I don't think it's the best. I think it's the authentic you.
Right.
That you're peeling apart these layers. You're like you said, you're figuring out these challenges or these flaws and these things that you're like, oh, I don't love, and you're accepting them and you're integrating them and you're loving
Yeah.
them. And I think that's pure authenticity right there. And I think this conversation has been exactly that.
Yeah.
So makes me so happy. All right, let people know where they can find you, what you do, all that jazz.
Yes, I could be found on both Instagram and TikTok, beyond anxiety with the underscore at the end of it. I've also done some writings in the Rally Up magazine as well as the Helpful Living, and I definitely plan on doing some more work there. And can I announce something else that I haven't told?
Please go
Yes,
for it.
also working on a book that probably is gonna be released this fall.
Amazing.
Yeah, definitely in probably about the early to halfway stages. So there's a lot more work that needs to be done, but it's coming and it'll be done with, like I said, before the end of the year. So
I love that.
so
I will be reading that. I will tell you right now. Thank
yeah,
you so much. That's so exciting. That is a huge thing.
yeah,
Just thinking about where you were to now writing a book. I hope you're celebrating that because
yeah.
that's amazing. Absolutely
Thank
amazing.
you.
And,
And
I'm sure everyone listening here has just had their mind blown open and we're just as connected in this conversation as I was. And just seeing how you lead with such compassion and hope is such an inspiration. So thank you so much for being willing to join today and for the conversation.
thanks
And
for having me on.
absolutely.
This is again from that shy kind of private introvert to, and you definitely made this a comfortable, safe zone to be able to share, my story. So
Yeah.
definitely appreciative for the opportunity.
Happy to help. Happy to help. All right, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful day and make sure you go connect with Darius and stay tuned for his book as well. All
All
right.
right. Thank you.
Bye,
Take
everyone.
Bye.